So, the task I set myself was to clarify as far as I was able the process and nature of the self-creation Castoriadis speaks of, a creation that is non-deterministic and whose author and product is the self in a variety of forms, from the living being to society and ultimately the autonomous subject. I found that this quest led me to begin with the most basic example of self-creation, that of the living being, and then to follow the development of self-creation through its various instances. One of the prime problems was that which Castoriadis identifies under the heading of leaning on. This sort of self-creation, or the sort of self-creation Castoriadis envisages, is one in which there's no determination of that which is created by that which precedes or is external to it. And yet, the existence of the self, from the living being up, requires the establishment of a relationship between the self and its creations and the external world. Without such a relationship, the self could simply not survive. Castoriadis calls this type of non-deterministic relationship leaning on, and he views it as a type of relation as important as that of causality. What I attempted to do was to elucidate this relationship of leaning on as it develops in the process of self-creation. In particular, I found myself confronted with the need to explain how a self or psyche which creates its own psychical world spontaneously and in an undetermined fashion ever manages to establish a relationship between the contents of this world and the external environment. That is to say, how psychical presentations can ever become representations in the fullest sense. One of the interesting things that emerged from my exploration was the realization that self-creation seemed to inevitably result in the creation of both otherness and others, especially other selves, and that the self was always and essentially divided, that it could not exist as singular and homogeneous, but was always riven by internal differentiation. If the first part of the book focuses on the quest for the self-creating self, the second part is an investigation of Castoriadis's ontological ideas. By this I mean the philosophical implications of Castoriadis's rejection of determinism, not only in relation to society or the human, but universally. According to Castoriadis, we live in an essentially indeterministic universe, and all those philosophies and theories that posit the universe as deterministic and the define being as being determinate are wrong. The idea of fundamental ontological indeterminacy is extraordinarily bold and far-reaching. I try to elucidate its implications as well as the reasons Castoriadis was drawn to such a conclusion. I also try to explore Castoriadis's efforts to elucidate this indeterminacy. One of the chief problems is to show how such an overarching indeterminacy can be consistent with some form and degree of determination. It's all very well, for example, to reject the deterministic vision of being and the world that logic, mathematics, and the natural sciences are inclined to posit, but it is another to explain how it is that logic, mathematics, and science can be so effective in their own fields if the universe is indeed indeterministic and being fundamentally indeterminate. The richness of Castoriadis's thought shows itself in the way that his critique of determinism does not hang in the air, but is instead grounded in an explanation of the reasons for this determinism, which makes sense in terms of our understanding of society, the human being, and even the nature of the self-creating being generally. I've described the book's journey as like a circle, a hermeneutical circle, I've said, which arouses the ire of those who agree with Castoriadis's dismissive attitude to the tradition of philosophical hermeneutics. I won't try to defend my use of this description here, but as far as the circular character of the book's path is concerned, This shows itself in the way the book returns to the issue of the relationship between autonomy and heteronomy after its long excursion through the byways of biology, psychology, ontology, and logic. I hope and believe that my ability to understand these concepts has been enhanced by an exploration of fundamental questions, and I also hope and believe that the process of investigation itself yields insights and other surprises that make it worthwhile, even for those who may not like to dwell too long in the more obscure places opened up by ideas that are as profound and important as those of Castoriadis. Well, since completing the book, I've continued to work on issues arising from Castoriadis' work. I have an essay which appears in the current issue of the journal Critical Horizons on Castoriadis' important and difficult concept of creation. There are some who are very much attracted to Castoriadis' ideas, but who find his concept of creation completely unpalatable, and who are consequently inclined to ignore or dilute it. I argue against any dilution, and try to show that, when understood correctly, the concept of creation ex nihilo is not as fantastic as it can seem. I've also explored the implication of Castoriadis' conception of indeterminacy for our understanding of society and the unity of the singular society. The understanding of the self that emerged from the inquiries in my book led me to a keen awareness of plurality as essential to any self whatsoever, and I've explored some of the implications of this and the relationship between this plurality and the idea of ontological indeterminacy for our understanding of society in an essay which will appear in the European Journal of Social Theory in 2012. I have a number of other essay projects relating to the features of Castoriadis' work that most fascinate me. I also have a longer project aimed at developing the hermeneutical dimension of Castoriadis' work by elucidating the relationship between cultural interpretation and creativity. In this, I am preceded by Johan Arneson, whose work has been pointing in this direction for many years, and Susie Adams. Well, that's all I have time for today. Thank you for your attention, and once again, I wish you all the best for the conference.